She went to sleep memorizing flashcards for her biochemistry midterm: enzyme pathways, metabolic cycles, little arrows and acronyms scribbled in neon highlighter. She was 19, exhausted like every other college student pulling late-night study marathons, nothing unusual. But when she woke up the next morning at 7:12 a.m., she didn't know where she was. The posters on her wall looked unfamiliar, the laptop on her desk felt like it belonged to someone else. She stumbled into the hallway of her dorm, hair tangled, eyes scanning faces as if they were characters from a dream that hadn't fully loaded. When her roommate asked if she was okay, she replied with a question that made the air go still. "Who are you?" At first, everyone thought she was joking, playing some bizarre prank fueled by sleep debt and caffeine. But the blank confusion in her eyes sank into them slowly, then all at once. By noon, she couldn't remember the names of her professors, her classes, her parents. She kept asking the same questions every few minutes, caught in a loop she couldn't escape. And then came the hallucinations: shadows slipping under doors, whispers that made her turn her head sharply, insisting someone was calling her name. The campus nurse saw her pacing the waiting room, holding her phone like it was a foreign object. She kept typing and deleting messages, unable to remember what she was trying to say. Something was pulling her mind apart thread by thread. Doctors rushed her through triage when she arrived at the 46 p.m., trembling, disoriented, clutching a textbook she didn't recognize but insisted was hers. Her vital signs were stable: no fever, no trauma, no overdose. The medical team ran the usual tests, checked for meningitis, ran a tox screen. Everything came back normal, but her confusion deepened by the hour. She forgot where the bathroom was, she didn't know what year it was. She asked if she was dreaming, then cried because she couldn't tell if the crying was real. By 5 p.m., the neurologist on call noticed something strange. Her eye movements were jerky, unfocused, drifting in opposite directions as if each eye was following a separate story. When she tried to stand, her legs buckled beneath her. She reached out for the bedrail and missed it entirely. The neurologist ordered an MRI. The scan showed no tumors, no swelling, no strokes. Her brain looked normal to normal, which meant something invisible was attacking the circuits that stored memory and coordinated movement, something biochemical, something fast. Her mother arrived at 8:30 p.m., breathless from sprinting through the hospital parking garage. But when she entered the room, her daughter stared at her like she was a stranger. The mother's voice cracked as she introduced herself to her own child. And the girl, confused and shaking, whispered, "I don't remember you." "I'm sorry." Nurses stopped in the hallway to steady their breaths. Moments like that had a way of rearranging the air around them. By midnight, her temperature dropped slightly, her heart rate slowed, and the strange movements grew more pronounced. She started mumbling fragments of sentences, disconnected, fading as quickly as they appeared. Her hands trembled uncontrollably. She reached for things that weren't there. One moment she was calling out for someone named Lauren. No one in her life was named Lauren, and the next she was staring at her own reflection in the window, asking why her face looked wrong. Doctors began to piece together a terrifying possibility. This wasn't psychiatric. This wasn't stress. This wasn't burnout. This was neurological collapse, and it was happening in real time. At 2:17 a.m., a resident reviewing her labs noticed something faint, almost hidden: her thiamine levels. Vitamin B1, practically undetectable. The number was so low the machine flagged it twice to confirm. But she wasn't malnourished, she wasn't dieting. She wasn't drinking heavily, her lifestyle didn't match the profile of someone dangerously deficient. But the symptoms: memory loss, hallucinations, ataxia, eye movement abnormalities, they lined up with surgical precision. It was Wernicke's encephalopathy, a neurological emergency so lethal and fast-moving that untreated cases can lead to irreversible brain damage within 24 to 48 hours. The resident ran to the attending physician. They looked again at her chart. A note buried deep in her health history, something she had barely paid attention to her entire life. A rare genetic absorption disorder that affected how her intestines process certain micronutrients. It had never caused major issues, so it had been glossed over. But now it was the missing puzzle piece. She wasn't absorbing vitamin B1 at all. It wasn't her diet that failed her. Her biology had been quietly betraying her for years. And suddenly it wasn't quiet anymore. At 2:40 a.m., a nurse rushed in with an for bag. Thiamine 500 milligrams, a massive dose, pushed into her bloodstream like a chemical rescue rope. If she had been diagnosed hours later, she might have slipped into a coma. If she had been diagnosed a day later, she might never have recovered. Her mother held her hand as the infusion began, whispering stories from her childhood, hoping anything would strike a spark in the dark. Minutes passed, the monitors hummed, the fluorescent light flickered softly above her bed. Her breathing steadied. Her eyes stopped darting so frantically. She blinked slowly, as if surfacing from a deep underwater dive. And then, at 3:08 a.m., she whispered a single word. "Mom?" Her mother froze. Tears burst through the dam she'd been holding back for hours. The doctors watched, stunned. It wasn't full recovery, not yet, but it was a flicker, a signal that her neurons were responding, that the damage wasn't permanent, that the storm had stopped just short of destroying the core of who she was. By sunrise, fragments of memory returned, not full scenes, just flashes. Her dorm hallway, the smell of her shampoo, the ringtone her phone used to have. She asked how long she'd been here. When they said one day, she stared in disbelief. To her, it felt like she'd been missing for weeks, like her life had been paused and restarted by someone else's hand. Over the next days, as more thiamine infusions flowed into her veins, the fog began to lift. Her balance returned, her vision stabilized. She started recalling conversations, names, classes, but the strangest part wasn't what she forgot, it was what she remembered from the hours she'd been gone. She described colors swirling on the ceiling, voices whispering between the beeps of the heart monitor, people sitting in the room who weren't there. Hallucinations so vivid she still questioned whether they'd been dreams. The neurologist told her that her brain had been misfiring electrical signals, creating illusions to fill the gaps in reality. Her neurons, starving for energy they couldn't create without thiamine, were improvising madness to stay alive. She spent the next week in the hospital, undergoing genetic panels, nutritional evaluations, and neurological tests. The diagnosis, a rare, inherited defect in the transporter that carries vitamin B1 from the gut into the bloodstream. Something she had been born with, something she never knew she needed to monitor. Something that turned one ordinary night of studying into a spiral toward oblivion. Daniel E. November 22, 2025, 12:36 a.m. When she finally returned to campus, friends stared at her like she'd come back from another dimension, and in a way, she had. She resumed classes slowly, carefully. She carried supplements everywhere. She set alarms to remind herself to eat, hydrate, rest, simple tasks that now felt sacred. But there were still moments, late at night, when she'd pause mid-sentence, trying to remember if she'd told someone a story yesterday or last month. Her mind wasn't broken, it was healing, and healing takes time. The strangest part was how relatable her symptoms seemed before everything collapsed. Brain fog, forgetfulness, fatigue. Everyone on campus felt those things. Everyone joked about memory gaps after all-nighters. But hers weren't jokes, they were warnings. Warnings that had been invisible until the moment they weren't. She still keeps the lab report showing her thiamine level printed out and tucked inside her journal. Not as a reminder of how fragile the mind can be, but as proof of how close she came to losing herself forever because of a single missing vitamin. A vitamin so small and ordinary that most people never think about it. A vitamin her body had been silently rejecting since the day she was born. Whenever she feels a flicker of fear, when she forgets where she put her keys, or hesitates mid-sentence, she takes a deep breath and remembers the night she woke up with her life erased. And she remembers how quickly she came back. How close she came to never coming back at all. Because in the end, what nearly destroyed her wasn't a trauma, or a disease, or a catastrophic accident. It was a deficiency smaller than a grain of sand. And it almost rewrote her entire identity overnight.